Xender TV and to the third series of our Sunday Reflection with SamDom. Today, we are presented with three readings. The first reading from the first book of Kings, chapter 3, verse 5 and 7 to 12. And the second reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 28 to 30. And the third reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, verse 44 to 52. But our concentration will be from verse 44 to 46. The theme of our reflection this week is the treasure in Gibeon. What is this Gibeon? And what is this treasure in Gibeon? Let's make some expositions in the readings of today. In the first reading, there are 5 characteristics which I will be calling our attention to. And these 5 characteristics, the first I call the approach. The second I call the sacrifice and worship. The third I call the dream. The fourth I call the invocation of Solomon. And the fifth I call the response of God. In the approach, Solomon, having in mind the intention of governing his people in the right path, sought for the help of God. And for the help of God, he went to Gibeon. He approached God in Gibeon. Gibeon was a principal high place of worship where the people offered sacrifice to God. Solomon approached God and offered him thousands of burnt offerings. And God, being pleased with Solomon, visited Solomon in the dream. Now, in the ancient days, before the era of prophecy, dreams were a major channel through which God communicated to his people. He communicated with his people. Now, God visited Solomon in the dream. And being pleased, he said, ask for whatever you want. Solomon, having the people's intention at heart, sought for wisdom and understanding in order to rule his people in the right path. And God, being happy with him, we saw now the response of God. For this you ask, I will do it for you. In fact, I have done it for you. Now, we move to the second reading. St. Paul made an emphatic statement that God has called us to share in his glory. This glory, for Christians, we must have the Christian code. It is with this Christian code that we align with the ultimate barcode. This ultimate barcode, when we align with the ultimate barcode, everything, as St. Paul says, we work for our own good. For St. Paul says, everything works for all who obey and do the will of God. And what is this will of God? Obeying the commandments and doing your part and building and living the Christian faith. Now, we move to the gospel reading today. In the gospel reading, we are presented with 2 parables. The parable of the treasure and the parable of the pearl. The cut-line emphasis, which is so important in these parables, is the discovery. The discovery of treasure. The joy of discovery. Now, in the parable of the treasure, Christ used what was the case in the Palestinian time of the Palestinians of his time and made an analogy of the kingdom of God. The Palestinians of Christ's time, and it's also the case in the present day Palestine, the Palestinians were under the Roman law, but having the Jewish law also as their major. Now, the Palestinians have this idea that the bank is the thing of the rich. The bank is something that only the rich can afford to deposit money in. Now, the Palestinians see the poor deposit their money in the ground. And there is this chaotic lifestyle which the Palestinians are not that unfamiliar with war. And that is why in the time of war, what the Palestinians do, they gather their treasures, reposit it in the ground, and run away. And when the war is over, they come back to possess their treasures. And now Christ uses this analogy to portray the kingdom of God. And there is this idea in the Palestinian time that whoever finds a treasure, that treasure belongs to him. Now, going back to the parable of the treasure, it is also possible that the man who found this treasure was so hardworking, and it was very clear to us in the parable that this man had no finding the treasure in mind. He was just doing his normal business. He was just being hardworking, and his hard work earned him this treasure. Now, what was so important is that he found this treasure and hid it, went and looked, sold the whole he had to get this land where this treasure is deposited. Now, the same thing is applicable in the parable of the pearl. The merchant who is in search of the precious pearl that is scarce found one, went back, sold all he had, and bought this treasure. Now, dear brothers and sisters, dear friends, what are the lessons we need to go home with in the readings of today? First of all, for what we think we ask and God does not answer, it is for our own good. Most times, our human factor does not allow us to see the intention of God in our lives. God has plans for everyone. Again, one of the lessons we need to take home is nothing happens without the knowledge of God and without God being part of, or without the plan of God. Everything happens in our own good. Now, St. Paul had this particular address in mind where he built the idea of the Stoics theologically. The Stoics had the logos, which is the mind and reason of God. They see it as the cause of universe, as the cause of order in the universe. They see it as the cause of night, the cause of day, and others. Now, it is not enough. The Stoics equally see the logos as having plan in the universe. Logically, that which causes or which caused the order has plan also for the order. Now, St. Paul now said, Christ has planned for every individual. So for whatever happens to us, God has knowledge of it, and He has planned it for our own good. He created us. He has our own good at heart. Now, the next lesson we will also learn in today's reading is sacrifice. We need to thank God in every situation. We saw how Solomon met God in Gibeon and thanked Him, offered Him sacrifice in thanksgiving, and God answered his prayers. So we are today called to give thanks to God at all costs in every situation. The next one is seeking the treasure. Seeking the treasure. In the parable, the two parables presented to us today, we saw the discovery, the joy of the discovery, the joy of discovering the treasure. We need to discover treasure always. And what is this treasure? The treasure is God. We need to seek God always in all we do. Seek God always. See God in our daily activities. We are called to see God in our task, in our neighbors, and in all we do. For in seeing God, everything will work for us and for our own good. Now, the next lesson we need to take home is the kingdom. The kingdom. The kingdom is being in the kingdom, is accepting and doing the will of God. Dear brothers and sisters, may God continue to bless us. May He continue to grant us grace so that we'll keep seeking Him, the treasure, seeking Him and doing His will. And when we do His will, everything will work in our own good. May the good Lord bless His words in our hearts. Don't forget, like our page, click on the subscribe button and also on the notification button so that you'll be getting our normal series.